What is up, guys? I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit weird. I am still battling a little bit of a sickness, so please bear with me. But we're going to get right into the video. Basically, the regular season is over, and now we can look ahead to conference championship weekend. And this year, automatic bids are on the line, so it's win and you're in. And for a lot of the teams, we're going to talk about losing doesn't really knock them out either. Anyways, we're going to start with the games that have the most impact on the playoffs and work our way to the ones that may not be quite as consequential. And with that being said, let's kick off things with a game that may very well decide whether or not Alabama is in the playoffs, and that's Clemson versus SMU. And you may be wondering, how is this game really going to affect Alabama? Well, if Clemson wins this thing, they punch a ticket to the playoffs, but what's going to happen to SMU? That's really the only drama we have this week as far as the playoff is concerned, where the committee drop SMU below Alabama, with a loss securing Alabama's place in the 12, or would SMU kick Alabama out of the playoffs by dropping right above them? Well, none of that's going to matter if my prediction is accurate. So what's my prediction? SMU wins the game. And if SMU does win, Clemson is almost definitely out of the playoffs, which would mean Alabama would secure the final at-large spot. So why do I think SMU is going to win this game? Well, I think that they have a very high-powered offense that Clemson will have a very hard time being able to stop. And it's not a team that really fluked their way or lucked their way into the championship game either. They have definitely earned it. They only have one loss, and that's to BYU before they made the switch to Kevin Jennings as their full-time quarterback. Since then, undefeated and very explosive. And I'm not just talking about explosive on offense, which they very much are, but I'm also talking explosivity on defense. They are one of the very best, if not the best, at generating pressure. SMU's defense will be in the backfield, whether Clemson likes it or not. And that's something we saw Clemson have to face last week against South Carolina, and that led to a fairly low offensive production for Clemson. And they are also very excellent at stopping the run. And the only thing I could really see SMU being burned on is the turnover battle. Clemson is very good at forcing turnovers, and SMU has been somewhat prone to giving them away. Also, Clemson may have some explosive plays of their own. I saw some of the receivers last week make some really big plays that were very impressive. At the end of the day, though, I don't think Clemson will be able to sustain drives in the same way, and I think SMU's defense will force Clemson to be pretty one-dimensional. They can try to run it with Phil Maffa, but I really doubt they're going to see much success. Meanwhile, I expect SMU to be very dynamic on offense. I think that they're going to be able to run it and pass the ball very effectively. As long as turnovers don't kill them, I really expect SMU to win this game somewhat convincingly. I know that may shock some of you who haven't really seen SMU play much this year, but they are the real deal, I promise. Kevin Jennings is phenomenal. He's a dual threat quarterback, and I think that they're just a better team in this scenario. Clemson has obviously been in this spot several times before, so I do think they have a bit of an advantage from that perspective. And they also don't have to travel as far. But Clemson has a hard time in big games this year, and I think SMU is ready for the big moment. Give me the Pony Express, which unfortunately means I expect Alabama will make the college football playoffs. Moving on now, though, to the Big 12 championship game where Arizona State is taking on Iowa State. And I bet not many of you had this game on your bingo card in the preseason for the Big 12 championship game, but here we are. Many people expected Arizona State to be at the bottom of the conference and Oklahoma State to be at the top. Myself somewhat included in that group, but instead we got the opposite. Oklahoma State is the worst team in the Big 12 this year, and Arizona State is playing for a conference championship game. That's just what the Big 12 is. It's the wild, wild west out there. And this is an interesting matchup because we did not get to see it in the regular season, and the winner of this game goes to the playoffs, while the loser is forced to stay at home. It's definitely a win or you're in type of situation, so the stakes are at an all-time high for this game. Honestly, Arizona State did not look the best to start the season, losing to Texas Tech and Cincinnati and almost losing to Texas State and Mississippi State, but they have definitely played their best football at the end of the season here, winning their last 5 games, including wins over BYU and Kansas State, so very impressive wins there. On the flip side, though, Iowa State has been pretty consistent throughout the season with a few hiccups. Like Arizona State, Iowa State also lost to Texas Tech, but they also lost to Kansas. And they've won their last 3 games, including wins over Cincinnati and Kansas State as well. So both teams, to me, look pretty even in quality. So there really is not, it's hard to predict this game, but I think I have to go with Arizona State here. And my main reason for picking them is the same reason I picked them in the past few games, and he goes by the name of Cam Skattebo. I think he will be a game changer for the Sun Devils. This will be a classic case of one team's strength specifically targeting another team's weakness. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the team with the advantage is going to win, but I do think it's a pretty big indicator. In this case, Iowa State is weak against the run, and Arizona State has a heck of a run game spearheaded by Skattebo. And if Iowa State can't stop him, there's really little hope for the Cyclones. And that may sound like this game is as good as over, but for one, there's a reason that these games are played on the field and not on paper. But secondly, Arizona State has a bit of a red zone issue. They are phenomenal at getting into the red zone, but not really great at maximizing their points when they get there. And for a team that leans on the run so much, that could definitely be a problem. If you're an explosive offense, that may not be quite as much of an issue since you can score from outside of the red zone, but that's not Arizona State. And if Arizona State cannot score in the red zone, that could really be an issue for them because Iowa State can definitely score on their side of the ball. Rocco Becht is very capable at quarterback, and he makes really good decisions, and he doesn't really turn the ball over. So Arizona State will have to make the most of their drives. Same goes the other way around. At the end of the day, though, I do think Arizona State will win this game. I think that they will wear down Iowa State's defense, run the ball effectively, and find their way to the end zone enough times to win the game. And next, I have Boise State at UNLV. At the beginning of the season, when we were all talking about auto bids and bye weeks for conference champions, I think we all kind of expected that the 4 byes would go to power conference teams because surely a G5 school wouldn't be ranked ahead of a power conference champion. But we were all wrong. Maybe if Boise State wins this game, they will get a bye in the first round, and the winner of the Big 12 will be the one that has the first round from home, the host of a home game. But if Boise State loses, then what? Well, then they would be out of the playoffs, and UNLV would take their place, but the Big 12 champ would receive that first round bye. Regardless of what happens, though, this game was incredible the first time, and I expected to deliver just as much this time. Last time it was played at UNLV's home turf. This time, it's going to be on the Smurf turf at Boise State. Essentially, this is a playoff game in its own right. I think that Boise State will win it. They have home field advantage, and a guy by the name of Ashton Jeanty, I'm sure you've heard of him. It's worth pointing out that the last time these two teams met, Ashton Jeanty did not have as productive of a game as he is used to having. So very big credit to UNLV's defense. They've been very good at stopping the run all season long, including when they played against Ashton Jeanty. And on top of that, they have an excellent rushing attack themselves, and they have a quarterback that can run the ball and pass the ball very effectively. Additionally, they are very disciplined. They rarely turn the ball over or get penalized. Honestly, if this game was not being played at Boise State, I would have to pick UNLV. But playing this game at home is a huge advantage here for the Broncos. Not only do they have the home field environment, but they also have the advantage of weather conditions and travel distance. UNLV plays in an indoor stadium in Nevada where it's hot, and they have to make the trek to a very cold outdoor stadium in Idaho. That is absolutely going to be a factor that I think favors Boise State. And while I do expect UNLV to be able to contain Ashton Jeanty effectively, I think that he will find a way to break out at least 1 or 2 big runs that give the Broncos the win. But to do that, Maddox Madsen will have to be at the top of his game. He needs to be accurate and quick to release the ball so that Jeanty can do his thing on the ground. But anyways, give me the Broncos in this one. And moving on now to the Big Ten championship game, Oregon versus Penn State. And a week ago, I thought this game was going to be a rematch between Ohio State and Oregon. But, Ohio State lost another game to their rival. So they're going to have to watch from home. And that means it's Oregon versus Penn State. And can James Franklin finally win a big game? I don't think so. I think Oregon is a more balanced team. And I think Penn State maybe get a little exposed here, as I do think they're a little bit overrated. Their schedule allowed them to look a lot better than I think that they are, but they really haven't played anyone good other than Ohio State, who they lost to. And honestly, the same can be said about Oregon, but they won their game against the Buckeyes, and they are the only remaining undefeated team. But from watching these two teams, I just think Oregon is the more impressive-looking team. Penn State has an offense that isn't very explosive and really depends on Tyler Warren at tight end and Nick Singleton at running back. I don't really expect this Penn State team to be one that puts up a lot of points. That's just not the style of ball that they end up playing. They're definitely going to try to limit possessions with really long drives that wear down Oregon's defense and then play really good defense when they are on that side of the ball. And to their credit, they're really good at defense. They definitely have the style of defense necessary to play that style of ball. They are one of the best teams at defending the run, and they can absolutely get pressure, and they get pressure very quickly. So if the Oregon tackles and the rest of that offensive line don't play their best game, Dillon Gabriel is going to be on his back a lot and forced to make some improvised throws, and that can very easily lead to turnover margin tipping Penn State's direction and giving them field position advantages and other advantages as well. Thankfully, though, for Oregon, they have one of the best offensive lines in the country. In fact, they're one of the finalists for the Joe Moore Award. And for those of you who don't know, that's an award for the best offensive line in the country. Suffice it to say, I think that they are up to the task. And even if they struggle a bit, I do trust Dillon Gabriel to make big plays in big moments. There's a reason he's in the Heisman conversations right now. He also has some of the best wide receivers in the country to throw to. And that's really where I think Oregon's going to win this game, through the air. Penn State secondary has been playing a lot better than I expected them to going into this year, but they're going up against an incredible wide receiver group that I think will be able to take over this game for Oregon. I also think that defensively, Oregon will be able to limit Singleton fairly effectively. Basically, I think both defenses will play very well, but I trust Oregon's quarterback, offensive line, and wide receivers more than I trust what Penn State has. And I think that there's going to be more explosive plays for Oregon that can disrupt how Penn State wants to play this game. So I'm going to go with the Ducks, but I do want to point out something pretty interesting here. If you look at the way the playoff bracket is set up, I almost think the loser has a more favorable path to the national championship, but that's just me. Go ahead and check it out for yourselves. And last but not least, Georgia versus Texas, and it seems pretty clear to me that both of these teams will be in the playoffs no matter what happens in this game, much like Penn State Oregon. So this is essentially a game that decides who gets the bye and who gets the at-large spot. Georgia did play Texas in the regular season. It was a home game for Texas, and the result was a very commanding victory for the Dogs. So it would be very easy to look at this game and think, if Georgia can dominate Texas at their own place, surely Georgia will win a game closer to home in a less hostile environment. But there is a lot more to this game than that, I think. The regular season game between these two teams was especially odd and pretty hard to duplicate. Georgia had a very favorable field position all night, and Texas really couldn't get out of their own way here. And I think that the current version of Texas is a much improved version of themselves, and I don't think that I can say the same thing about Georgia, especially since Etienne's condition for the game is questionable. Etienne was a big part of Georgia's win over Texas earlier in the season, so not having him at full health could be really huge. Also, it's clear at this point that Georgia struggles against mobile quarterbacks. So if Texas decides to do more with Arch Manning, I think the Dogs could be in some real trouble. But when you look at Texas' schedule, they still really haven't been tested too much. They've had about as easy of an SEC schedule as you can possibly have, while Georgia has been tested a ton, having one of the hardest that you can get. And there are a lot of factors in this game in particular. Texas has maybe one of the best defenses in the country, and Georgia has had some problems offensively. Carson Beck has been inconsistent and turnover prone all season, and the run game has not had much going on, and that will be even more so if Etienne is not 100%. But Georgia is an excellent second half team, so if they keep it close going into the half, I really think that Kirby Smart can make the necessary adjustments to put Georgia in a very favorable position to win this game. However, in many of those fourth quarter scenarios, Georgia has the edge in the depth and endurance department, and that's not something I really think they have here. I think Texas is pretty comparable in that department. But Carson Beck is going to need to make good decisions in this game. Mike Bobo is going to have to be creative with his play calling. I think if Georgia plays like they did against Tennessee, they're going to win, especially since Texas has had some offensive struggles themselves. They have the roster and talent much like Georgia does, but for whatever reason, they haven't been able to put it all together. And at the end of the day, I have faith in Georgia, and I think that they are capable of winning this game if they bring their A game, as long as Mike Bobo gives Carson Beck a long enough leash. So that's all for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you check out my socials, _rock321 on X and Threads. You can get all the rest of my content on there. So yeah, peace.